I'm not crying. I'm 31 years old. I live in Vancouver, and I just got promoted to senior structural engineer at one of the most respected firms in British Columbia. I'm standing in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, drinking coffee that costs too much and staring out at the North Shore Mountains, and I am not crying. I should explain. My name is Vivian. That's what my parents named me. Though by the time I was 12, I'd started to wonder if they remembered it. Not because they were cruel people exactly. My parents were the kind of people who thought they were doing everything right. They went to church on Sundays, they paid their taxes, they coached my younger sister's hockey team for 6 consecutive winters, driving 2 hours to Abbotsford and back on Friday nights, cheerful and loud and fully pleasant in a way they never quite managed to be when it came to me. My sister's name is Colette. She's 3 years younger than me, and from the time she was old enough to lace up skates, she was the sun around which our family orbited. I want to be careful here. I don't hate my sister. She didn't ask to be the favorite. But she was undeniably, completely, and with a totality that shaped every year of my childhood in ways I'm still untangling. When I was 9, I won a regional science fair. I'd built a working water filtration model using sand, gravel, and activated charcoal, and I'd written up the process in a 15-page report that my teacher photocopied and pinned to the wall of her classroom. My parents got the date wrong and showed up a day late. There was nobody there. The display had already been taken down. My teacher told me what had happened when I came in the next morning, and she looked so sorry that I told her it was fine, that they'd just mixed up the calendar. I got very good at saying that. The following Saturday, both of them drove 40 minutes to watch Colette's novice hockey tournament. They bought matching foam fingers at the rink shop. They screened themselves hoarse from the bleachers. Colette's team came third. There were photos taken, a celebratory dinner at the Swiss Chalet on Kingsway, and a little trophy on the mantel in the living room that stayed there for 4 years. I told myself these things were small. Lots of families have a kid who needs more attention. Colette was more social, more visible in her achievements. Science fair plaques don't make noise the way hockey arenas do. I understood this, or I tried to. But there's a photograph, or rather, the absence of one, that I keep coming back to. In the front hallway of the house I grew up in, there's a wall of family photos. It runs from the closet door to the window. When I was around 14, I started counting. There were 32 photos. I was in 4 of them, and in 3 of those 4 I was standing slightly behind Colette, partially cut off by the frame. Colette was in 27. My parents had a whole gallery of her at tournaments, recitals, birthday parties, team photos, candids. I asked my mom about it once. I kept my voice even. I said, "Mom, how come there aren't more pictures of me up there?" She looked at the wall like she was seeing it for the first time. Then she said, "You were always so independent, Vivian. You didn't need all that." I was 14. I didn't know what to say to that. I just went upstairs and sat on my bed for a while, and then I opened my textbooks and started studying, because that was the one place where what I did actually showed up in the record. I was a good student. I want to be honest about that without it sounding like bragging, but it's important context for everything that follows. I worked hard in a way that came from somewhere genuine, some deep need to build something that was mine, that couldn't be reassigned or accidentally given to someone else. I graduated high school with a 96.4 average. I was accepted into the civil engineering program at the University of British Columbia with a scholarship that covered most of my first 2 years. My parents came to the grad ceremony. That surprised me. But they left immediately after for Colette's year-end hockey banquet, which conflicted, and they'd already bought the tickets. I stood in the parking lot in my grad dress and watched their car pull out. My friend Simone drove me to the after party, and I didn't tell anyone what had just happened. University changed things for me, not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, the way good light changes a room. I had professors who read my work carefully. I had lab partners who cared whether I showed up. I had a part-time job at a structural consulting firm in Kitsilano, where the lead engineer, a woman named Dr. Oki, told me in my second month that I had a rare spatial intuition and that I should never let anyone talk me out of this field. I printed that out and kept it in my desk. I called home less. My parents didn't seem to notice, or if they did, they didn't say anything. My mom would send texts sometimes. Colette's team made the provincials. Colette got a new skate sponsorship. It's not that big a deal, but still so exciting. And I would respond with a thumbs up or a brief congratulation and then set my phone face down on my desk and keep working. In my fourth year, I was selected for a competitive research exchange at the University of Waterloo, which in engineering circles is about as prestigious as it gets in Canada. I called home to tell them. My mom said that was wonderful, really wonderful, and then in the same breath told me that Colette had been asked to train with the National Development Program. I said that was great news. There was a pause. She said she had to go. They were getting dinner ready. I hung up and sat in my apartment for a long time. I want to be accurate about when the change happened in me because I think it's important. It wasn't a sudden decision. It was more like a slow, quiet conclusion that I arrived at over several years. The way you realize a friendship has ended, not with a fight, but with a long, gradual silence. I didn't stop loving my parents. I just stopped expecting anything from them. And when you stop expecting things, you also stop needing to be present in the same way. I graduated from UBC with distinction. First in my cohort. The dean shook my hand on the stage and said my name clearly and slowly, and the auditorium applauded. And I looked out at the seats and found my friend Simone in the third row, and she was standing up. My parents were not there. Colette had a tournament in Red Deer that weekend. They'd already booked the flights. I had given them the graduation date 7 months in advance. I'd sent the formal invitation from the university. I'd booked them a hotel 2 blocks from the venue, knowing they'd never do it themselves. I'd even mapped out parking because my dad has a thing about parking in downtown Vancouver. I had done everything I could think of to make it easy for them to be there. And they were in Red Deer. I found out mid-ceremony when I checked my phone after coming off the stage. My mom had sent a text 20 minutes earlier. So sorry, honey, flight delay, and then the arena ran long. So proud of you. Call us later. There was a photo attached. It was of Colette in her hockey gear, stick raised, celebrating a goal. They'd sent the wrong photo. I don't know if they ever realized it. I stood in the lobby of the Chan Center while my classmates took photos with their families, and I held my degree in both hands, and I thought about the wall in the hallway at home. 32 photos, 4 of me. And I thought, I am done. I am done. I didn't call them later. I didn't call them the next day or the day after. I went home to my apartment in Kitsilano. I sat with what I was feeling for a long time, and then I did something I'd never done before. I let myself be angry. Not performatively, not so anyone else could see. Just alone in my apartment, finally letting the whole accumulated weight of it press down on me without trying to hold it up. I cried. Not for the dry tuition, exactly. For the science fair, for the parking lot after grad, for every time I'd made my voice smaller so the disappointment wouldn't show. For the photo they'd sent by mistake. And then I cleaned my apartment, went to bed, made myself breakfast the next morning, and started my new life. I didn't block my parents' numbers, but I stopped responding. Not out of spite. I thought about this a lot actually. I just had nothing left to give the relationship, and I was done pretending otherwise. When my mom called, her messages went unanswered. When my dad texted, the same. Colette never reached out, which I noted without surprise. 6 months passed, then a year. I got the senior engineer position. I moved into a bigger apartment with a view of the inlet. I started running along the seawall in the mornings, something I'd always meant to do. I built a life that felt like mine in a way nothing had before. My aunt, my mom's sister, tracked me down through my old university email about 2 years in. She and I had always been on decent terms, though we'd never been close. She said she was worried. She said my parents were struggling. She said my mom had started crying at family dinners, and my dad barely spoke. I appreciated her reaching out, genuinely. I told her I understood, and that I needed more time, and that I wasn't ready to have that conversation. She was kind about it. She didn't push. What I didn't say was, I don't know if I'll ever be ready, because I didn't know. And I wasn't going to promise something I couldn't deliver. Time does a strange thing to old pain. It doesn't disappear, but it changes texture. It stops being sharp and becomes more like a watermark, present if you look at the light the right way, but not something you notice every morning. I thought about my parents less. I thought about the wall less. I thought about Radia less. I was genuinely happy most days in a way that surprised me with its quietness. Happy didn't feel like fireworks anymore. It felt like coming home to a clean apartment and a full fridge and nobody waiting to redirect the conversation towards someone else. Then my cousin got married. My cousin Poppy. She's on my dad's side. We've always been friendly. Sent me an invitation to her wedding in Kelowna. It was a summer wedding. Outdoor ceremony on a vineyard, the whole thing. I almost declined. I sat with the invitation for 2 weeks, knowing what it meant. My parents would be there, my dad's family, his siblings, the whole structure. I would have to exist in the same space. But Poppy and I had a real history. She'd visited me in Vancouver twice. She texted me real things, the kind of texts that aren't just emojis. She'd also told me quietly, a year earlier, that she thought I'd been treated unfairly growing up, and that she'd always found it hard to watch. That meant something to me. I RSVP'd yes. I drove to Kelowna on a Thursday in July, windows down, podcasts loud, and I told myself I could handle whatever happened. I arrived before my parents. I found Poppy in the vineyard doing photos, and she hugged me for a long time and said she was glad I came, and I believed her. I found my seat at the rehearsal dinner, and I talked to people, and I ate well, and I was fine. My parents arrived late, mid-appetizer. My mom saw me first. The look on her face, I want to describe it accurately. It wasn't just surprise, it was something collapsing, some long-held posture giving way. She came over to the table, and she said my name, and her voice broke on the second syllable. My dad was right behind her. He looked older than I'd remembered. He looked tired in a specific way that goes beyond sleep. I said hello. I kept my voice even. I was polite. I was not cold, but I was not warm, and I think they understood the difference. We got through the rehearsal dinner. My mom tried to catch my eye several times across the table. My dad sat quietly and seemed to be searching for something to say and not finding it. I talked to my cousins. I drank 1 glass of wine slowly. I did not make it easy for them, but I didn't make it hard either. I just was, in the same room, and let that be what it was. The wedding itself was the next afternoon. It was genuinely beautiful. Poppy looked radiant. Her partner made everyone cry with his vows. The mountains behind the vineyard turned gold in the late afternoon light. I cried at the vows, which I hadn't expected. Something about 2 people promising to show up for each other in all the ways that mattered. At the reception, my dad found me. I was standing near the edge of the vineyard with a glass of sparkling water, watching the dance floor. He came and stood beside me, and for a while he just looked at the same thing I was looking at. Then he said, "I have something I want to read to you, if you'll let me." And he took a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. I looked at it. Then I looked at him. He was holding the paper with both hands, and they were not steady. I said, "Okay." He read it quietly, so no one else could hear. He didn't try to explain or justify what had happened. He didn't say we were just so busy or we didn't realize. He said, "I know that I missed you. I mean that in both senses. I was there every day and I missed you. And I am sorry for that. In a way I don't have words for except these words, which aren't enough. And I know they aren't enough. And I'm reading them to you anyway." He talked about the science fair. I hadn't known he knew about it. But he did. He'd heard about it from my teacher years later at a grocery store. He said that story had stayed with him and he hadn't known what to do with it. He talked about my graduation. He said he had watched the live stream alone in the hotel room in Red Deer. That he'd sat on the bed and watched my name scroll on the screen, and that somewhere in that moment he had understood what they'd done. He didn't say your mother. He said, "we." He kept saying we. He held the paper and his hands shook. I listened to all of it. When he finished, he folded the paper carefully and put it back in his pocket. He didn't look at me with hope, exactly. He looked at me the way you look at something you've broken and know you can't unbreak, but you still want the person to know that you see it. that you see it clearly. I thought about saying a lot of things. I thought about the wall in the hallway, the foam fingers, the Swiss chalet, the wrong photo of Colette in her hockey gear. I said, I heard you, Dad. And I meant it. I wasn't ready to say more than that. And I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. But I had heard him. That was real. That was something neither of us had done well enough for a long time. Really heard the other person. And so I gave him that. He nodded. He looked at the dance floor. After a while, he said, You turned out. And then he stopped, like he was recalibrating the sentence. He said, You built something really good, Vivian. I said, I know. I did it mostly myself. He said, I know. We stood there for a little longer. Then Poppy pulled me onto the dance floor, and I let her, and I danced badly and laughed about it, and the mountains went dark blue behind the vineyard lights, and somewhere behind me, my father was sitting alone at a table, and I let that be what it was, too. I drove back to Vancouver on the Sunday. I stopped in Merritt for gas and a coffee and stood in the parking lot for a few minutes just breathing the dry interior air, looking at the flat stretch of highway behind me and the mountains ahead. I thought about everything that had happened, and then I thought about my apartment waiting for me, my plants that needed watering, my Monday morning meeting at work, the project I was excited about. My parents texted that evening to the girls, both of them separately, within about 20 minutes of each other. My mom wrote, Thank you for coming. I have so much I want to say. I hope you'll give me a chance. My dad wrote just, Safe drive home. We love you. I read both messages. I set my phone face up on the kitchen counter, which was different from before. I didn't respond that night. I wasn't ready. But I left it face up, and that felt like enough for now. That small, deliberate change, just for me, in a clean apartment with a view of the inlet and a life that finally, fully belonged to me. There's a moment in the story I keep returning to. Not the graduation, not the wedding, not my dad standing at the edge of the vineyard with a folded piece of paper in both hands. It's the science fair. Not ladled over the phone, in the dry bear, and the dry wheel and activated charcoal, and nobody there to see it. That's the one that stays. I think about the version of me who walked into that classroom the next morning and told my teacher it was fine, they just mixed up the calendar. I wasn't lying exactly. I was doing what I'd already learned to do. I was managing the gap between what I needed and what was available. I was protecting myself and protecting them all at once. That habit, that quiet, persistent self-sufficiency is the thing that saved me later. It didn't feel like a gift at the time. It felt like a necessity. But necessity and gift are sometimes the same thing, depending on which direction you're looking. What I've come to understand is that the choices we make when no one is watching, the labs we show up to, the reports we write, the extra hours we put in because the work itself means something to us, those choices compound. Not later mental ways anyone can see on a Tuesday night when you're riding the city bus home in the rain. But they compound. The discipline I built in those years wasn't about proving anything to my parents. It couldn't have been. They weren't watching. It was about something quieter and more durable than that. It was about deciding, over and over, that my life was worth building carefully, regardless of who noticed. There's a kind of intelligence that doesn't show up on a transcript. It's the intelligence of knowing what's actually happening in a room, of understanding patterns before they're named, of seeing clearly without letting what you see make you cruel. I think I developed that watching my family for years. Noticing what was given and what was withheld. Noticing the distance between what people said and what they meant. Noticing that my dad watched the live stream alone in a hotel room in Red Deer and didn't tell anyone. That kind of seeing is uncomfortable. But it's also honest. And honesty, real honesty, not the kind you perform but the kind you carry privately, is what makes it possible to eventually walk into a vineyard in Kelowna and say I heard you without either collapsing or pretending. My dad's letter was injustice. I want to be clear about that. It didn't restore anything, but it was real, and I think the reason it reached me is that I had spent years building something solid enough to receive it without being destabilized by it. I didn't need him to say those words to be okay. That's what made it possible to actually let them in. I left the phone face up on the counter that Sunday night. It was such a small thing. But I knew what it meant. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not the erasure of 32 photos on a wall. It meant I was willing to stay present in my own life, including the parts of it that were still unresolved. That's the hardest thing I know how to do, and I'm still learning it. Staying present when things are unfinished, not glazing off, not pretending, not making myself smaller to avoid discomfort. Just remaining with clear eyes in whatever room I'm actually in. I built something really good, my dad said. I know, I told him. I did it mostly myself. That's not bitterness, that's just the truth. And the truth I found is usually where the good stuff starts.